On the morning of September 2, 2025, the skies over eastern Ukraine were silent. Not a single alarm signal pierced the silence. Air defense radars were operating normally. But far from the front lines, over the waters of the Caspian Sea, a Western reconnaissance satellite picked up strange thermal radiation. A Russian MiG-31 BVK fighter fired a Kinzhal hypersonic missile. A moment later, the projectile disappeared into thin air, not from invisibility, but from a monstrous speed that NATO systems simply could not track. Minutes later, the earth shook on the southern outskirts of Kramatorsk from a deafening explosion. Seismic instruments across the region recorded tremors measuring up to 2.3 on the Richter scale. As the Russian Defense Ministry later announced, the target was an armored command center of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. This object had been studied for weeks through space images, drones, and radio interception. According to intelligence, the building contained Ukrainian generals and military consultants from the UK, Poland, and Canada. After the attack, images from the Canadian company Skywatch showed the complete ruins of the three-story reinforced concrete building, which was built according to NATO standards. The roof had collapsed inward. The protective ceilings were breached in the very center. The air defense systems in the area, including the Patriot P-32 battery, the IRIS and NAM systems, did not notice the flying missile at all. Long-range radars also missed the threat. For the first time in the entire campaign, a strategic strike reached the most guarded command post, remaining completely unnoticed. The dagger demonstrated not just the accuracy of its hit, but the complete impotence of modern defense against the speed and maneuverability of hypersonic weapons. Pentagon military experts were forced to agree at a secret meeting. No technology can track the entire complex path of the dagger. This meant a revolution in military affairs, a transition from stationary lines of defense to a three-dimensional battle, where speed destroys any prepared defense. Soon Western news channels and Ukrainian websites showed the first images of the destruction. Black smoke billowed over the ruins, military equipment was ablaze, rescuers were frantically searching for survivors. But the command was gone. The control center, which had been working non-stop for 6 months and was considered the brain of all military coordination on the Eastern Front, was wiped out in a second. By evening, Kyiv had not made a single official statement about casualties and did not acknowledge the presence of NATO advisors during the strike. But what happened in Kramatorsk on the morning of August 31st could not be hidden. It was not just an explosion. It was the moment when the strategic balance, tensely held for many months, was broken by a weapon that cannot be shot down, cannot be predicted, and for which no one is prepared. Immediately after the dagger strike was confirmed, questions arose in Western expert circles about how a missile with a range of over 2,000 kilometers passed through the entire integrated air defense system of Ukraine unnoticed. According to Polish and Romanian radar posts, no ground-based radar or early warning system detected the missile's trajectory even at the initial acceleration stage, which is usually considered the weak point of all hypersonic vehicles. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry later admitted that the Patriot P-3 and RIRIST air defense systems, NASAMS and electronic warfare units did not sound an alarm. According to one anonymous officer, the system did not have time to recognize the dagger as a target. This was the first time that the entire air defense network paid for by NATO was completely neutralized by a single weapon. American analysts called it the worst possible scenario, which became Eve. The Pentagon convened an emergency meeting. According to the American military press, senior advisors admitted that the K-47M2 Kinzhal is still beyond the reach of any existing systems at all altitudes. Speeds in excess of Mach 10 combined with the ability to maneuver multiple times on the way make any prediction algorithms useless. An unofficial representative of the German Defense Ministry commented briefly, "We have nothing that could prevent a repeat." The international reaction came within hours of the explosion in Kramatorsk. In Washington, a representative of the U.S. State Department called the attack a dangerous escalation, but avoided mentioning specific losses. In Berlin, Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced the need to review the entire mechanism for supporting Ukrainian air defense. In London, the British Ministry of Defence admitted through internal channels that the strike had penetrated the deepest echelon defence, and everyone agreed on one thing. No one disputed the fact that the missile had hit the target. A source in the Bundeswehr reported that just 12 hours after the incident, the General Staff of Ukraine ordered the urgent evacuation of a number of forward command posts from the Dnieper, Poltava, and Vinnytsia regions. The direction of the western border is closer to Poland. The Kyiv authorities believed that the proximity to NATO territory could create a deterrent effect and increase the level of security in the face of hypersonic weapons. But experts called it a strategic illusion. 47 M2 Kinzhal is launched from a MiG-31 BVK aircraft, operating beyond the reach of all Ukrainian air defense systems. With a range of over 2,000 kilometers, there is not a single area of Ukraine that can be considered a safe rear. Analysts at the USRN Corporation compared the current situation to a chessboard, where the queen can move without restrictions, and the enemy has no way to stop it. By the end of the day, the largest media outlets CNN, Sky News, DV, RTBF covered the events in different tones, but all around one central truth. Hypersonic weapons hit one of the most protected command centers. Without interference, without detection, and without the possibility of interception. In this war, technology has ceased to be a secondary element. They have become a strategic center. And the dagger is not just a missile, it is a statement about a new era of war. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, the attack on the headquarters in Kramatorsk was not a one-off action, but part of a three-layer strategic plan developed several months earlier. At a meeting at Russian headquarters, Defense Minister Andrei Belousov explained the strategy for the complete destruction of the command system and control of the enemy's weapons, extreme speed, absolute accuracy, and complete invulnerability to interception. The dagger was chosen for the first phase. The direct consequences of the attack included not only material destruction, but also a chain catastrophe of the entire operational control system. Within 6 hours of the attack, 3 forward headquarters in Dnieper, Poltava, and Vinnytsia received emergency evacuation orders. For the first time since the beginning of the conflict, frontline units were deprived of direct commands from the central command at the operational level. This paralysis forced decisions to be made at the battalion level in conditions of a deficit of information, supplies, and without guarantees of fire support. On the Eastern Front, where fierce battles were unfolding in the Kharkiv and Sumy regions, the consequences of the attack became apparent the following day. The 4th Ukrainian Armed Forces Coordination Headquarters, which previously played a key role in artillery control and UAV coordination, ceased operations. Communications were cut off, coordinates disappeared, artillery strikes missed or arrived with a critical delay. In many cases, Ukraine's rocket artillery units were forced to completely cease fire due to the threat of their own troops being hit. In internal conversations intercepted and made public by Russia, many Ukrainian officers admitted, there is no longer a command. Everyone is fighting for themselves. In one of the dialogues between 2 artillery units near Kupiansk, published on the Rybar Telegram channel, it was said, "No one is responding on Channel 3. We are shooting blindly." Foreign military advisors, especially from the US and UK, began to leave forward headquarters, according to European media, to reorganize personnel. However, according to information from Warsaw, the real reason for this move was the fear of becoming the next target. In NATO's strategic think tanks, Brussels and Ramstein, forecasting models were starved of reliable data. The lack of information from Ukrainian command posts led to a breakdown in the entire system of early warning, assessment, response, and preparation of proposals for military support from the West. On the ground, Russia continued to increase its intelligence activity and prepare for new strikes. According to Open Intelligence, the intensity of the use of Russian reconnaissance UAVs and RB aircraft tripled in the 24 hours after the dagger strike. Kramatorsk, as military analysts warned, was not the final blow. It was the introduction. From it, a chain of consequences stretched across the entire structure of the Ukrainian campaign. Loss of central command, chaos in fire coordination, panic evacuation, and a drop in morale. According to the Institute for the Study of War and the U.S. Army, the dagger strike can be viewed as reconnaissance in force with the use of fire for Ukraine's new line of defense. A test that showed NATO is unable to protect command centers located deep in Allied territory. Less than 24 hours after the Kinzhal missile strike, the entire combat zone in eastern Ukraine began to show signs of a serious crisis. In the Kharkiv-Kupiansk sector, previously the key defensive line of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Russian units quickly stepped up their offensive, exploiting the vacuum, control, and confusion in the enemy's command system. Artillery, missile, and tactical airstrikes fanned out, opening the way for a large-scale breakthrough. Airborne units of the Russian airborne forces entered from the northeast and quickly occupied the heights on the outskirts of Kupiansk. At the same time, mechanized units of the Zapad task force crossed flooded areas and minefields, attacking from the direction of Petropavlovka, the former key defensive line. Due to the loss of communication with the tactical command post, the Ukrainian brigades in strongholds received neither fire support nor line adjustments and were forced to retreat in small groups. Within 36 hours, the entire line of defense from Senkivka to Tavolzhanka collapsed like dominoes. The lack of data for coordinating fire effectively paralyzed the Ukrainian artillery. Russian Orlan-10 drones and kamikaze Lancet drones continuously hovered over the area, simultaneously directing artillery and destroying pockets of resistance. The Russian Defense Ministry published footage of Gaubitz M77 and Leopard 2 tank positions being destroyed within minutes of opening fire, since effective camouflage measures were not used. Meanwhile, the psychological state of Ukrainian servicemen deteriorated sharply. According to intercepted communications analyzed by the Russian Electronic Warfare Center, many forward units expressed discontent, confusion, and fear. Some commanders demanded that they withdraw to regroup, while rear units refused to go to the front line. In the Vovchansk area, completely abandoned defensive positions were recorded. Weapons and armored vehicles were abandoned without signs of combat. In the air, Russian aviation continued to maintain overwhelming superiority. Su-34 and Su-25 aircraft carried out pinpoint strikes on supply depots, overpasses, and support points. Swarms of groups of loitering Cub and GERAN-2 UAVs attacked priority targets from radars and ammunition depots to mobile command posts. Smerch and Tornado multiple launch rocket systems struck at preset coordinates, thwarting any attempts by Ukraine to restore combat capability. In the south, the strategic imbalance became obvious. A strike by Geran-2 drones and Iskander-M missiles completely destroyed a large fuel storage facility near Voznesensk in the Nikolaev region. The flames raged for over 4 hours. The smoke column was visible at a distance of over 30 kilometers. This storage facility was the main source of supplies for Ukrainian groups in the Kryvyi Rog and Nikopol areas. The loss of the base forced Kyiv to transfer reserves from the east to the south, which further weakened the defense in the Kharkiv direction. Experts from the U.S. Institute for the Study of War, ISW, and the Conflict Intelligence Team agree that the actions of the Russian army bear the signs of a single operation, not random and non-retaliatory. Each strike was part of a systematic plan, from the destruction of command centers to the deprivation of supplies and weapons depots, from blocking drones to paralyzing communications. This is a model of a three-level war. Decapitate the command, paralyze logistics, destroy combat capability. Within 72 hours after the strike on the headquarters in Kramatorsk, Europe's diplomatic chessboard changed dramatically. A closed meeting chaired by Secretary-General Stoltenberg was held at NATO headquarters in Brussels. The agenda, an assessment of the scale of Ukraine's losses and the possibility of a collective response. According to the German and Polish press, the atmosphere in the room was tense and no longer as unanimous as before. Some delegations, especially from Western Europe, directly asked whether it was worth continuing to support a military model that could not prevent a single strike. In the U.S., the media tone began to change. CBS News asked, "The dagger is undermining the balance of power." At the same time, CN launched a special project called War Goes Hypersonic, inviting defense experts to discuss the prospect that Western air defense systems no longer guarantee a strategic advantage. At the Pentagon, a Defense Department spokesman confirmed that a comprehensive reassessment of air defense capabilities in Eastern Europe is underway. Although formal commitments have not changed, journalists noted a new cautiousness in statements. In Poland, Prime Minister Donald Tusk publicly acknowledged for the first time at a press conference in Warsaw, "We need a new defense model that is more realistic, less dependent on the strategic assumptions of past decades." At the same time, in Berlin, Defense Minister Boris Pistorius warned that the current pace of arms deliveries is not keeping pace with the growing technological dynamics of war. This statement was seen as the first alarm signal from a key NATO country about the loss of the initiative in the face of an adversary using a strategy of deep technological offensive. Moscow, by contrast, has taken a completely different position. Statements, without special briefings. Only a short speech by Major General Igor Konashenkov, a representative of the Russian Ministry of Defense. The operation near Kupiansk is proceeding according to plan. At the same time, he emphasized, the goal of the strikes is to destroy the entire logistics, command and supply infrastructure of the enemy, wherever it is located and no matter what technologies it is protected by. The message was obvious. Russia no longer limits the theater of military operations by geography, but only by strategic arrangement. On Earth, the chain of consequences continued to expand. The supply line from western Ukraine to eastern Ukraine was cut at 3 key points. Ukrainian troops were forced to abandon strategic positions near Kupiansk and in Senkivka. Russian attack drones, together with Su-34s with guided missiles, controlled the airspace around the clock. Local attempts at counterattacks were destroyed even at the concentration stages. Paralysis of control turned into a systemic effect. Communication was lost, command was disorganized, morale was lost. From a political point of view, many international experts called the dagger strike a turning point. It not only changed the situation on the battlefield, but also redefined the parameters of the entire conflict. In a commentary for Foreign Affairs, Analyst Edward Ludwak noted, Russia is not demanding capitulation or issuing ultimatums. Instead, it is setting a precedent that technological superiority can change the status quo without crossing a political line. In other words, action is replacing negotiation. The strike did not just destroy one headquarters. It exposed the limits of post-Cold War military doctrine, which was built on the assumption that the West always retains technological control, always able to detect and respond. But when weapons can fly at speeds in excess of Mach 10, bypassing all detection systems and penetrating billions of dollars of air defense systems, the concept of a secure front ceases to exist. The strategic conclusion is clear. While Western capitals hold meetings, issue statements and weigh new aid packages, Russia is moving quickly, quietly and precisely. A stab with daggers is not a tactic. It is a military declaration for the 21st century. It states a cold, simple truth. In modern warfare, three things decide: factors, speed, accuracy, and initiative. He who has all three may not speak words. Reality itself speaks for him.